Welcome, listeners. You are listening to a podcast from the Free People's Movement out of Sweden. Episode 8. Raoul Wallenberg. What really happened to him? Raoul Wallenberg was a Swedish architect, businessman, diplomat, and humanitarian. Born the 4th of August 1912 and disappeared the 17th of January 1945. The official story is that he saved thousands of Jews in German-occupied Hungary during the Holocaust from German Nazis and Hungarian fascists during the later stages of World War II. While serving as Sweden's special envoy in Budapest between July and December 1944, Wallenberg issued protective passports and sheltered Jews in buildings designated as Swedish territory. While some have claimed that Wallenberg rescued as many as 100,000 Jews, some historians consider that figure to be an exaggeration, and the actual number of people rescued to be substantially lower. Is it still considered rescuing if the people who got rescued had to pay their rescuer? If you have taken anything from previous episodes, you have probably gathered that the Wallenbergs are not really in it for humanitarian reasons. On the 17th of January 1945, during the siege of Budapest by the Red Army, Wallenberg was detained by Smersh on suspicion of espionage and subsequently disappeared. He was later reported to have died on the 17th of July 1947 while imprisoned in the Lubyanka, the prison at the headquarters of the KGB secret police in Moscow. The motives behind Wallenberg's arrest and imprisonment by the Soviet government, along with questions surrounding the circumstances of his death and his ties to US intelligence, remain mysterious and are the subject of continued speculation. So, let's speculate. Documents from the Swedish Military Intelligence Agency's archive show that Swedish intelligence officers in 1943 began a secret collaboration with high-ranking colleagues within Hungarian intelligence and counterintelligence services. This regarding intelligence operations carried out by local communists and the Soviet Union. The Swedish involvement in such activities was very sensitive because since June 1941, Sweden officially represented Soviet interests in Hungary and in other Axis powers. So Sweden played on both sides, as usual. It's hard to fend off the impression that so did Raoul Wallenberg on several levels. In addition, the Swedish delegation in Budapest, Raoul Wallenberg included, supported the Hungarian resistance movement, whose main goal was to defeat Nazism, which they themselves, of course, were behind, and at the same time, prevent a Soviet occupation of Hungary. The central and completely rhetorical question that remains is whether Swedish and Russian authorities actually aimed to solve the Wallenberg mystery. This was even a question after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Or maybe their primary goal was to remove the matter from the common political agenda completely. In other words, was the investigation guided by a foregone conclusion, and therefore in several ways, only a waste of time, energy, and good faith? Why was important information kept secret, repeatedly, not only from independent researchers, but also from Raoul Wallenberg's brother, who was an official member of the Swedish-Russian working group? For the simple reason that the information did not fit with the official story. Another basic question is therefore, to what extent did Swedish and Russian administrators intentionally protect certain sensitive information, and why? A while ago, it became known that Swedish authorities, in the 1980s, discussed and coordinated the publication of documents in the Wallenberg case with several countries. These countries included, funnily enough, Israel. This was such a delicate matter that if too much information regarding the reality of Raoul Wallenberg's situation and the rest of the Wallenberg family's actions during the Second World War would emerge, they would indeed find themselves in a shitstorm, of which the likes has never, ever, been seen. Stalin might also have had his reasons to keep the lid shut in this matter, because Stalin himself and the Soviet Union bought weapons from IG Farben through the British Minister of Armaments, Lord Beaverbrook. It wouldn't have been in the best interest for Stalin's image at home if that information were to come out. And all the while Investor, through ABB and Ericsson, were still doing business within the Soviet Union with Stalin's approval. Another thing that might make Stalin hesitant to act on the information is that throughout the Soviet era, from 1921 and through the Cold War, the Russian Central Bank Committee, the Narkomfin, was just as controlled by the banking hegemony as the current central bank in Russia is today. We can therefore with certainty now say that just as we have predicted, what is coming now is only the beginning of an information campaign that will destabilize the deep state within the Anglo-Zionist banking hegemony. Not to mention how confidence in Swedish politics will drastically change. The information that didn't come to light in the mock trials in Nuremberg will soon emerge. And that will be completely devastating for the Swedish people's self-image, because it will turn everything they thought to be true upside down. The assassination of Raoul Wallenberg took place because of something that Sweden did in its foreign policy for the benefit of the Soviet Union. It's not at all improbable that Raoul Wallenberg was executed according to Swedish wishes. Anyone who reads about the Wallenberg family's actions in connection with this process, not least regarding the Washington negotiations after the Bosch affair, can draw the same conclusion. The international political and diplomatic correspondence speaks clearly about this matter if you bother to connect the dots. What Raoul Wallenberg did together with his cousins, Jacob and Marcus Wallenberg, would be used by the Soviet Union against them in future trials, and it concerned conspiracies with the Nazis in Germany. When the Russian security service had taken him in, they looked at the Swedish diplomat with great suspicion, and branded Wallenberg as an American agent, with contacts with the German security service as well. With the negotiations on the fate of the Jews in occupied territory as a pretext, an unofficial regular communication channel between German and American intelligence was established through Wallenberg's care. This must also have included Reinhard Gehlen, the head of Nazi intelligence. Once Raoul Wallenberg had been arrested, his fate might have been decided by the Russian security service's view of his activities, if it wasn't for the game that was going on behind the scenes. Initially, it was decided that they would hand over Wallenberg to the Swedish side, but as soon as the information about his contacts with the deep state, meaning his connections to German security service and American intelligence, came from the first directorate of the MGB, the former name of the KGB, Stalin gave orders to Abakumov, the Minister of Security, to arrest him and move him to Moscow. There was never any evidence that Raoul Wallenberg was a spy, according to Ivan Serov of the KGB. But Stalin and Foreign Minister Molotov still saw the possibility of using him in their political game as the Nuremberg trials against the Nazi leaders approached after the end of the war. Because Stalin and Molotov had knowledge of what had been going on behind the scenes between the Wallenberg brothers and the Nazis. They also planned to use his testimony as a trump card in secret negotiations with the Americans on what topics should not be discussed in the Nuremberg trials. So if anything negative was said about the Soviet Union, the information about Raoul Wallenberg would be brought forward and clog the dirty mouths of the deep state globally, forever. The American side therefore instead offered to exclude questions about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact from the agenda in Nuremberg. The counterclaim was that the Russians should not raise issues of financial connection between the United States and German industrialists through mediation of the Wallenberg family, which was the real meaning of the Bosch affair. And the ownership in the IG Farben group in general were not to be discussed, as well as the secret US negotiations on a separate peace deal with the Germans. When the Nuremberg trials were over, Raoul Wallenberg, in the eyes of the Soviet leaders, seemed to have played his part. But he would still be retained for later use against Sweden and Investor. Consider this carefully. Raoul Wallenberg had now become a liability for the deep state. After the end of the Nuremberg trial, Raoul Wallenberg had lost his value. Stalin didn't think there was any point in sending him home, and it seems that it was Molotov who raised the issue of liquidation, according to an official Russian version. According to this official Russian version from 1957, the so-called Gromyko Memorandum, the Swedish diplomat died a natural death in the Lubyanka prison on July 17, 1947. In 2011, the former deputy head of the FSB's Registry and Archives Directorate, Colonel Vladimir Vinogradov, informed a Swedish diplomat in Moscow that Raoul Wallenberg had in fact been interrogated after the official death date. This is the clearest confirmation that the official Soviet version of Raoul Wallenberg's fate is a lie, but instead of bringing clarity to the case, the Swedish Foreign Ministry chose to keep the information secret. If the Wallenbergs had indeed made a deal with the Russians to liquidate Raoul, and the Russians showed him this deal, might that have made him even more talkative? The documents concerning Raoul Wallenberg, according to Stalin, were to be used for blackmail against the Swedes who had collaborated with the Nazis since long before 1938. Let's just say that the Swedish political establishment, who is now and always has been, under the control of the deep state, through the Wallenbergs, does not want this information to surface. All we can say is, good luck. Follow us into our next episode where we discover more about the Swedish signal intelligence and how Sweden has always been playing both sides. Thank you for listening.